Okay, so what's the focus of this panel? PHP is a big open source project, and we all use it, right? But if you look at PHP as an open source system, you will find that only maybe 10 to 15 people are actually really making a difference to the core of PHP. They're the people that really make things going and move stuff, and they're really key to it. Every person on this panel today is somebody who has made a real key difference to open source. They're people who have moved things forward. And what we want them to talk about today is how do we get more of them? How do we grow more new people? How do we create the right environment for them? So that's the focus of our panel. Johanna?
Okay, so we're just going to start off and introduce all the panelists. So we'll just go down the line, and if you could each give us a quick 20-second introduction of who you are and any contributions you've made to the PHP community or the open source, greater open source communities. So start with Aral.
Okay, cool. Hi, my name is Aral. The contributions I've made. Well, I was in the Flash world for a long time, and I founded something called OS Flash, Open Source Flash, which was a website where a lot of the open source Flash projects originated, like Red 5, Hex, etc. We kind of just all came together there. I've been involved with open source throughout because I learned so much from reading other people's code and from people who shared that I wanted to give back. So I think PHP-wise, I think the most popular thing I ever did was a WordPress plugin that I released that let you, I think it was called inline posts for putting posts into pages or something. I still get emails about that today. I mean, I haven't touched it in years. Yeah.
I'm Beth Tucker-Long. I work for PHP Architect. I'm not huge into the open source community. I have one pull request, one successful pull request, I should say. I have a couple others that I'm still working on. So not big into that side of it, but as a PHP Architect employee, we run conferences in the magazine and we teach training courses, and so we're very big into promoting open source software. So we're more on the promotion side.
Hi, my name's Martijn, Java. So I help coordinate the global efforts of Java user groups and other volunteers to work on Java itself and also to work on the Java enterprise standards. Pretty large open source project, to put it mildly.
You forgot to mention Java.
Java.
I'm Sara Golemon. I've been working on the PHP internals, the runtime and the engine, since about 2002. Wrote the book on extensions and internals. Kind of been quiet the last 5 years, got sucked into the private sector, but coming back a bit because I'm working on hip hop as well. And some SSH library out there as well, but that really has nothing to do with PHP.
And hi, I'm Ian Barber. I feel like I'm on blind date at the moment.
Moonlit Box?
Bachelor number one.
Yeah.
I've been doing open source stuff for a little while now. I've read Sarah's book and written a few extensions for PHP, and I'm also pretty heavily involved with the ZeroMQ messaging library.
But if you were a fruit, what fruit would you be?
It's
too deep.
Put you on the spot.
So let's kick this off with a question, and I don't want to start at one end, so I'm going to start with Martijn, because I want to know what contribution have you made to open source that you think's really made the biggest difference?
It's actually kind of political in a way. So our Java user group was the first user group to sit on the Java standards body itself, which is heavily dominated by Oracle, Google, investment banks such as Goldman Sachs, etc. So actually providing a developer's voice for the entire Java ecosystem has probably been the biggest contribution that I've made.
So what about somebody else? Go on,
I'm
come on.
afraid to say go-to, because I'm sort of the one to blame for that one in PHP.
Can't blame anyone?
Actually, I did not do the actual commit on that one, so blame, I think that was Dimitri. Actually, no, I think probably my biggest contribution was probably my SSH library, which has since been pulled into curl, so that's on pretty much every machine in the world at this point.
Okay, well, I would actually like to mention your book, because your book was a huge contribution.
That was useful, yeah. I read my own book from time to time.
Aral.
I don't know. There was an open source data format for Flash, kind of like JSON, but as a Swift that was used quite a bit. I don't know. What else? Gaybar, that was Google App Engine backup and restore when it didn't have backup and restore. Hey, if you're Google and you don't, put backup and restore into your cloud service, I'll call it whatever the heck I like, if I'm going to do it for you. I guess those. Probably those. They were used quite a bit.
Such a great name.
I love it.
I love it. So good.
Beth?
Well, that one pull request I did, I don't think changed the world very much.
You never know. You don't know that.
But I think I brought the total failing tests in Web to Project from like 13,000 down to like 12,098. So
That's good.
yeah, exactly. There you go.
People actually fix tests.
I don't know. I think actually I've probably had more impact going to conferences like this and speaking to people and blogging about things than the actual kind of code I've contributed. It's more that I've happened to talk to smart people and they've then themselves gone away and actually implemented something either in PHP or in another library that's had an impact. So I'd say, speaking and blogging probably.
A lot of features have come out of that and out of beer bottles.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute, I got a better answer for you. The XAuth Twitter engine, that was used in,
loads of things.
that was used in Instagram. So there you go. I didn't get a penny, but it's fine. It's fine. I'm not sore. It's fine.
You're not bitter about it.
Yeah, but that's mostly Matt Gemmell, though.
Aral, what software is that? Can you describe what
With
it
the
is?
XAuth Twitter engine? Oh, it was just, XAuth is a flavor of OAuth, which is, I should probably spit when I say that, OAuth. But it made OAuth easier because you could actually just get someone's username and password and then get your OAuth token instead of going through the web flow. Which is horrendous for native apps. I mean, it works on the web, yes, because you're not changing context, but for native apps, you're actually changing from a native context to a web context and back, which is a user experience nightmare. So when they introduced XAuth, I just implemented XAuth Twitter engine on top of MG Twitter engine that Matt Gemmell had created. And that got used. And also in the game Trains, I think, which was on iOS. It was a fun puzzle game, yeah. That's the cool thing about open source. You make something, and then people use it for stuff that you've never dreamed of, and that's what's so cool about it.
It is because open source, you contribute something or you put something out there, no one has to tell you that they're using it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then suddenly
awesome.
someone comes up and says, yeah, we're doing 30 million events per second with this. Oh,
yeah.
What are you doing?
And you're doing how?
Yeah, and with this? Oh, good.
You did? Oh, okay.
Because I don't like asking permission, so I don't want other people to ask permission for the stuff that I put out there. It's and I don't think we would be sitting here if it wasn't for open source. None of us. The internet wouldn't be what it is. If Tim Berners-Lee had kept it close to his chest and not opened up the protocols and everything, we wouldn't be sitting here. None of us would have a job.
Are you listening, Apple?
What do you guys think that makes open source communities successful, and what makes open source communities maybe not as successful or sometimes unsuccessful? And what should we be doing to do more things that are successful? How should we be evolving? How should things be changing for the better in the future? Now, Aral, we had an interesting conversation earlier today about bringing open source to the consumer space. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, it's definitely something that I would love to see happen. I want to see open source succeed in the consumer space. And I can't really, off the top of my head, think of an open source success in the consumer space today. And I think part of the problem is open source culture. It's not design-led. Design is seen as a layer, it's seen as an afterthought, it's seen as makeup and rouge. It's what we add at the end. We prettify things at the end. And the culture doesn't exist to understand the importance of design. So the development processes don't exist and the organizational structures don't exist in open source to be design-led, to have design at the core. And if you look at where open source succeeds today, it's when geeks are scratching their own itches, right? It's in operating systems systems when they're used for things like servers. It's in programming tools where we're scratching our own itch. What does scratching your own itch mean? It means you're the user, right? You're making something for yourself, and hence it will fulfill your needs. But in the consumer space, that's not the case. We're not building for geeks. And unless we're design-led, we're not going to succeed. And I want to see us succeed because I don't want a future where my only decision is, do I give my data to Facebook or to Google or to Twitter, to these closed silos, or do I put it all into iCloud on Apple? I want to have an open source solution, and that has to be the full stack. That has to be hardware and software. That's easy to use out of the box. I think we need that. We really need design-led open source, and that's going to take a cultural revolution in order to make happen.
Yeah, I mean, you look at how much Google and Android struggled with this exact problem for such a long time, and it's still struggling with it today.
Well, exactly, but why? Because when they released Android, they just said, okay, and now do whatever the heck you like with it. No control over the user experience whatsoever, right? And that's when you get that sort of crazy fragmentation. That crazy fragmentation, and if there is no such thing as Android. What is Android? I don't know. It's whatever UI customizations people have made, it's whatever other customizations, and when you talk about customizations for carriers and for device manufacturers, it basically means whatever fuck-ups they've implemented there on top of it, right? So the carriers fuck it up, and then the manufacturers fuck it up, and then finally you've got something that doesn't even look like whatever Google originally intended, even if they were entirely design-led.
Well, the unfortunate thing about that example is getting patches back into Android. Because to me, good open source projects are the ones that are completely open. The ones that have data going both ways.
Well, of course, Android isn't completely open either.
Not.
That's the thing, yeah. It's open.
It's an internal project of Google that kind of pushes out every once in a while. And my current project's guilty of that too. I want to fix that.
Yeah, but for example, with Mozilla and the Firefox OS, there's a real chance there for that to be that thing. But they're following the same model. They're following like even a worse model in a sense than Android, because it is entirely open, yes, but carriers can customize it and manufacturers can customize it. So they have no control over what's actually going to end up in people's hands.
But wasn't the point in your keynote that design isn't democratic? It needs a bit of dictatorialness. So that means if you're going to have that situation, what you have is a design-led process, but it's a designer-led process. There's someone that is making the decisions, and
which
there is
already
a
happens
limit.
in open source projects.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I love Python. I think Python is elegant, but Guido leads that with an iron fist in a sense, and we have that already, but we need that vision to be a design vision for the consumer market.
I think the thing with those kind of projects, whenever you see a project that's gone through that maturity, because open source projects always start with someone builds something for whatever reason, and they open source it and they get other people involved. And then there's a period of, you mentioned 10 to 15 PHP, and that's probably about right. But those 10 to 15 people are not the same from year to year. Right? Yeah. And there's a kind of whole backlog of people on there. And when you get to that sustainable point where there are rotating groups of people on it, the originator tends to find themselves in this benevolent dictator position, or this position where they are the arbiter of arguments, which is what Rasmus does a lot in PHP, which is come in and solve arguments and things like that.
I don't get the impression he wants to. He kind of gets us to, yeah.
I hate to cut across you guys because you're all so important, but I want to involve the audience, and I think we have a question.
Yay! Throw that man.
Hi, I have a question because concerning the organization of open source projects, do you actually think that there is a better one, or is there one that's more suitable? Like, is dictatorship more suitable for a project than anything else? Because looking at most of the open source project, except for PHP, and it doesn't really work that well in PHP, is the dictatorship actually is pretty good in open source. So what do you guys think about that?
I'm the benevolent dictator of one large open source project called PCGen, Dungeons and Dragons. Yes. And works well for me. What can I say? Yeah, you've only got to look at Linux as another example. Without Linus's guiding, sometimes not so gentle hands, I don't think Linux would be what it is today. So it needs, definitely, I think in my mind, one person or a small group of trusted people to give the project some direction. Any project in life needs direction if you want it to succeed. So
see, I disagree slightly with that last part. I think you're right. There needs to be a person, but it's less to give it direction and more to apply constraints and cherry pick. So there's a view, and you get where I think a lot of projects fail is where the original founder or something tries to have too tight a control and say it must go this way. Like one of the things that works with the kernel and works with a lot of projects is you have someone that said this is how it is. A lot of other people try stuff. And then you kind of go, yes, that's right, you can guide people towards something, but it's like choosing from the ideas that come in. One person does not have enough good ideas to maintain any sort of substantial open source project.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be one person either, but there has to be a design vision, especially in the consumer space. There has to be a design vision that you adhere to. You can't really cherry pick the vision. By definition, that's not how a design vision works. You got to know what you're building. Right? And the beauty of open source is, yeah, people can fork it. Yeah. They don't agree, they can fork it, and then you can cherry pick from those, as long as you're going with that vision. Yeah. So, I mean, for a consumer product, say a phone. Let's take a phone. Let's make an open source phone that actually competes with iPhone, right? You'd have to control the hardware. You'd have to control the software. You'd have to control the whole experience. You could make all of that open, and you could still control it. Let's call it an X phone. You could trademark that, and no one else can make an X phone and call it an X phone. Right? They can call it whatever else they want. But you can control the experience from the moment that people open the box, they take their X phone out, it's open hardware, open software, it's a beautiful experience, and that's what an X phone is. Right? And someone else makes an X phone, you sue them. But they can take it, they can make a Y phone, an X phone, screw it up, make it better, they can do whatever. But you still have that control. And I think that's the only way it will succeed in the consumer market.
See, I think the challenge with hardware in particular and all the things is that the change latency is extremely high. One of the reasons open source works for software is because I can come up with an idea and I can try it. And especially with Git and GitHub and a lot of projects like this, I can commit that and I can have a bunch of people try it. And very quickly I can iterate over ideas and problems and hit solutions. With hardware, you're in a much more difficult state. There's one of the things, Apple are very, very good at is you don't see that, the sausage being made there, but that's definitely been iterated a lot, and they are willing to make decisions to go through that. And I think anything open source in that space is challenging, which is why we've seen odd things like the Raspberry Pi come out, which, you look at its history, and that was iterated. That had to go through that. The faster you can change, the faster you can get to the right solution.
But Apple applies that to their software components as well. You can't just go onto the App Store and say, here's an app that does whatever. There's this approval process, something that has been sometimes controversial, sometimes just a pain in the ass, but they're exercising that same control. Do you not find that just aggravating?
See, I think that's a kind of my perspective as an end user of a certain artifact of a bit of software, as opposed to the perspective of someone that might want to modify that bit of software. So it's...
Well, we can't modify iOS.
We can't, no. But iOS is built on a bunch of open source stuff at the same time.
Yeah, like WebKit, for example.
Yeah, and bits of BSD.
So Sarah, we were talking earlier today, and
yes, we
you
were.
had some.
I was there.
You were there. I was there too. It was a great moment. So you had
I missed out.
No, Aral wasn't there. It was just me and Sarah.
You're lost.
But you had some interesting viewpoints on what works on the PHP group and what doesn't.
Did I?
So you don't have to talk about those specifically, but can you guys tell us what you think we should do differently in open source based on your experiences? We've been talking a lot about kind of what the problems are and what maybe things that have gone wrong and things. What should we do going forward? How should we be evolving?
Well, I'm going to harp on something that I've said already up here, and that is that the more open, the better, period, end sentence. PHP works really well because there's almost no barrier at entry to even work on it. My first exposure to working on the internals of PHP was like, it's stupid that I can only do base 10 and natural logarithms off of numbers. I want to throw an arbitrary base into there. Here's a diff. Okay, great, accepted, done. That took the span of a few minutes to actually get into that project. It probably would have been different today. It would have been, pull something, fork on a GitHub, that sort of thing. But it was still very open, and it's still open today. If you want to work on the PHP internals, you just do that. You just go grab the source, you say, here's something I want to change, and you just do it.
But what if you don't have karma?
That's what GitHub forking is for. You fork PHP source, you put your pull request up there, and you say, hey, I think this does what I need it to do, and I think it would be useful to other people. Can somebody do a pull on that for me? And for the first one, it's probably just going to be, okay, that looks good, let's pull it. Eventually, you're going to get karma anyway.
So is it true that only 10 to 15 people actually commit on PHP itself?
No. So the PHP is kind of split into a few pieces. There's the engine, which actually interprets the scripts and turns them into opcodes and all that kind of thing. That's probably 10 to 15 people. Okay. All the rest of it, which is the bulk of it, has some larger number. It's not massively larger. There's like 900 people who have the karma to potentially do it, but in practice, it's probably a couple, 3 dozen. It's not much bigger.
Well, I find that absolutely crazy. I mean, PHP is one of the most important programming languages in the world, full stop. And there's that few people who are actually taking the time to commit back to it?
Yeah, but
that's quite terrifying.
It's a quite mature, stable project.
That's the big thing there.
We're making incremental improvements.
So is Java, and we have about 300 or 400 committers on there.
Yeah, but you've got all sorts of
Wait a minute, that explains everything.
Yes.
What you'll find very often is that these will be bug fixes, so somebody will report a bug, and then one of those regulars will just see it and fix it because they know exactly where to fix it.
They do it faster.
Actually breaking into a project the size of PHP, just like breaking into a project the size of Java, is no small task.
No,
those 300 people didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, you know what? I think I see a problem in JNI. I'm going to fix that.
Yeah, no, it does take a lot of time.
Yeah.
That's true.
I think one thing that can really help, though, with the community is that we are very focused on getting new people involved. So we have conferences, we have user groups, we are really focused on teaching new people and trying to mentor people. So I think that really helps get people involved because, as Johanna said, well, what do you do if you don't have karma? Well, find someone who has karma.
Yeah. And that's because we need to get new blood in constantly because of that pool being so small. Like I said, I kind of got swallowed up by the private sector at one point and just wasn't working on PHP at all. That's one less person. That's a significant percentage, though. Marcus Berger used to be a big contributor. He stopped when he got married and had a kid and moved to Switzerland.
Switzerland.
I could name other people who just don't contribute to the project anymore because their lives have moved on to other places. Mm-hmm. Like APC is having trouble getting 5.4 compatibility because everyone who understands how that works is doing something else or just isn't interested in APC anymore.
On the topic of community, actually, and you were saying, what's perhaps lacking. One thing that I've seen, of course, in our community in general, but even more so in the open source community, I've noticed that there is quite a lack of diversity, even more so than in technology in general. And I don't know why that is, but it is something that I've noticed. And if there's one thing that rings true, it's that communities that have greater diversity benefit from that in a multitude of ways.
Ubuntu.
Yeah, exactly.
It is
so
a really
I
weird
think
thing,
that's sorry.
It is a really weird thing because with open source development, you're not looking at people. You have an email address, maybe a name that you're working with. I was only known as Puyita on the PHP list until I actually had to go and get a CVS account. Because I'm just like, I don't even want to throw my name out there.
Right.
Never mind that my name translates to chick in Spanish, but still. It's just like, you would think there would be more opportunity to build up diverse populations. I have no idea why that doesn't happen.
I think there's a bit of that where it's just, the internet is full of arseholes. And if you do, when you try and contribute, there's some degree of you're going to get man, woman, anything, whatever, you're going to get a degree of resistance. And I think if you've dealt with that more in your career and you've resulted in going, I'll leave it, I don't want conflict on this, you're more likely to do that in open source.
Although that said, I have seen different types of responses that guys get versus different types of responses that women get online. There's a sort of vitriol that I've never experienced as a guy online. And even though I'm very outspoken about my views, I'm pretty opinionated, I piss a lot of people off. And I've never gotten the kind of things that I've seen some women get for just stating very mundane views, like very, nothing that's too incendiary or anything, and getting the sort of feedback, just horrible, horrible feedback that I've never experienced as a guy. So I think there is an element there where it does come into play.
Can I just, I want to say something. No, not a bit. We got a 10-minute warning, and I have one last question for you in a minute. But I just wanted to say something on the diversity thing. That PHP is pretty damn good at diversity. When I first joined, I was always made welcome. I admit maybe half the people didn't know I was a woman, but I never had any trouble. Look at us. We have more women on the stage than we have men. This is pretty good, and I know we have an amazing PHP women group, and people are encouraged, and I think we should be setting an example for the rest of the world.
I don't actually know the answer to this, but I'm going to challenge you anyway. Name somebody on the team who's not white.
Name somebody who's not white.
Yeah.
That's pretty hard when I interact over email and IRC.
Well, that is the problem. That's why I don't know the answer.
That's also something we need
Basically,
to remember. When we talk about diversity, we're not talking about just one aspect of it.
That's true.
Yeah,
but
we've been discussing this as well recently.
When I ran the 2009 Test Fest, so we had user groups all over the world, and Brazil, okay, big user groups in South America.
Oh, the user population is just everywhere.
Yeah, but those guys are contributing to PHP. They wrote tests
in
for
many
us.
ways, yeah.
They were great. Anyway, I want to...
Zoe, we've just got a question from Rowan over
I'm
here.
sorry.
Hi, this might be a good one to kind of help you guys wrap up. I'm getting a lot better at contributing my own code in the sense that I stopped caring about what it looked like and just put it on GitHub. So I'd like to hear about your experiences about contributing your own code, and what kind of gotchas are there about, should I pick a license, that kind of thing. And also, what about getting code open sourced from work? So what kind of, because you need to present a more professional face there than you do when you just throw anything up on your GitHub account.
Yeah. That's a good question.
So first off, license, BSD. End of story. Don't touch GPL.
I don't know. I've got to say, it's BSD, but if you are totally happy with anyone doing whatever the hell they want with your code, if you, LGPL has some benefits, and I can see if you're making a library and you want to ensure that you have access to the changes that are happening somewhere else, because someone can just take BSD, go and do a bunch of changes, and use it in their own stuff and never ever contribute it back.
Any reason why you'd say BSD and not MIT? Because I find MIT a bit more elegant. Same rights, basically, unless I'm mistaken.
Isn't MIT non-attribution?
No, it's attribution.
Okay, fuck it then, MIT.
And what about Apache? Apache license?
Apache 2 is a good license, because Apache 2, it's got the patent
it's got
clauses in it, which are important if you happen to be working for a company that cares about patents.
I should also mention I worked for the University of California, so BSD is kind of like...
All right.
So I open sourced a middleware platform at a very large investment bank, and it's an interesting process. And the two huge problems are, one, legal. You will need to learn to speak Latin, and you will need to actually teach the lawyers what things like copyleft means, because the whole point of having lawyers is that they need to fight over a contract, and the idea of that you're actually trying to share something is completely and utterly foreign to them. It's like trying to share something with a crocodile. It just doesn't understand you. The other huge problem is the sort of opening of the firewall, as it were, for an organization. All of a sudden, this investment bank had to think about allowing contributions from the outside. Where do we do the hosting? Who gets commit rights? Oh, are they going to see our private mailing lists? What's going on here? And it actually ended up changing the entire social infrastructure of the whole IT department from this one little open source project. All of a sudden, things like Jenkins came in. All of a sudden, things like Git and GitHub came in and just spread throughout the whole organization because they were forced to deal with the outside world. So it can be a very positive change, but be prepared to deal with the lawyers. And you will not like it.
Shakespeare was right.
Okay. So we have just one last kind of wrap-up question, which it sort of ties into that. In fact, it's very similar to the last audience question, is what advice would you give aspiring members of any open source community? What's the key thing that you tell them to do for these folks now?
My first and last piece of advice is open source is a social activity, not a technical activity. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, open source, it should be fun. Like, you should be doing it primarily because you enjoy doing it, because there's always going to be something grinding at you or something annoying. If you don't enjoy it, it's going to be very hard to stick with.
And I would say, too, like, love making the contribution. Yes. But you should enjoy making the contribution, not the contribution itself, because when you submit it, they're going to tear it to shreds, and if you're too attached to it, you're going to take that way too personally. And so what you have to do is sort of realize that you are contributing to a project, and what you wrote is going to help, but maybe not in the form you wrote it in. And so don't get too attached to it how it is, and just appreciate the fact that you are moving things forward, even if it's not how you originally intended. So don't take it too seriously.
Well, I guess the only thing I can add to that is just to say, share. Don't really care about it. Like Rowan was saying, don't worry about, are people going to judge me about this code or not? If someone fixes it, that's a good thing. That's not a criticism. And we just have this amazing opportunity today, and it's completely different from 100 years ago. Things have changed so much where we have a community built on sharing, and I think not many of us would not be sitting here today if that wasn't the case. I know that I wouldn't be, because I learned everything that's important from things that other people have contributed. So just share, just put stuff out there. Just get a GitHub account if you don't have one, and put the stuff out there that you write, and people will improve upon it, or they won't. They'll ignore it. Who cares? Share. You will benefit from sharing, not just from the work of others, but from the act of actually sharing. And it will improve your code as well if you do that. So all I can say is just share what you do.
And open source is not just about software. It's
No.
documentation,
Exactly.
it's bug reporting, you can put poetry into GitHub and it'll work there just fine.
Yeah. Someone has recipes on GitHub. It's awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And if you put code out there and somebody goes through and cleans it up, look how much time they just saved you. Come on, it's great.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Which will probably not happen, by the way. It's not how it works. That's people open source their stuff thinking, wow, I'm going to get 100 people helping me on this. That's not how it works, right? There are a handful of projects where lots of people help out. Mostly, you'll just be getting emails from people going, how do I make it do this? But still, you will benefit from that experience.
About 5 years ago, I got a $1,000 video camera from a company that was building embedded Linux projects because they used my SSH library, and they're like, oh, thank you.
I know. It's awesome. Like Sega once got in touch with me and like, we're using your code in one of our games. Is that okay? I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Of course. It's open source.
Can I tell people?
It's awesome. Use it.
Probably not. The lawyers would say no.
Not if it's got an attribution clause.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to hand back over to Kira now for the closing remarks. But can we have a...
He's running.
He is.
Running, I see.
It's okay. We've got
He's
a big
almost
round
there.
of applause, please, for our amazing panelists.
For our moderators, please. Yay. Yeah.